Ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, welcome to the 97 Republic YouTube channel, where we react to news and live events of different sports. So I kindly ask that you hit the like button and the subscribe button, as that will really help this channel grow. And to ensure you don't skip a beat, click the notification bell as well. That way you can guarantee that you don't miss any of the action. Alright, so let's go. What is next for both Dricus Du Plessis and Strickland following UFC 312? Looking at potential matchups, looking at dates, who would they be fighting next? And I'm going to start off with Dricus simply because Stevie Wonder would be able to see Dricus' next opponent inside of the UFC. Now, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but there's a general consensus that suggests that Hamzat should be fighting and will be fighting Dricus next for the Middleweight Championship of the UFC. Now, after Dricus fought Sean the second time in the rematch at UFC 312 and beat Sean, Dricus basically gave a line from Troy where he looked at Alex Pereira, who was in Sean's corner, and said, "Is there no one else?" and repeated it twice, basically calling out Alex Pereira. But afterwards, at the post-fight press conference, Dricus elaborated on his call out and calling out Alex Pereira, but basically said that he would like to fight and defend his belt in middleweight for a few times and have Alex do the same at light heavyweight and then fight Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight championship of the UFC. But Dricus said that unequivocally Hamzat Chimaev should be next to fight for the middleweight championship, and basically went on to say a few things about Chimaev, nothing bad, but basically said in these exact words that Hamzat deserves a hiding and needs one, and Dricus would love to fight Hamzat next. Regarding the whole matchup, stylistically matching up to Hamzat, and if we're talking about zeros inside of UFC, right, guys that are undefeated, like top 3 zeros that you could take inside of the UFC is Ilia Topuria, Hamzat Chimaev, and Shavkat Rakhmonov, and probably in that order as well. So a lot of hype if Dricus had to fight Hamzat. And honestly thought about, apart from John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, let's just look at guys fighting someone in their own division. I'm not talking about going up in weight, fighting for a 2-division champ like Ilya, probably doing to Islam. Ilya might be potentially looking to fight at lightweight. I'm talking about guys fighting a contender in their division. Apart from John Jones and Tom Aspinall, Dricus versus Hamzat will probably be the biggest fight to make in the UFC. If we look at from a business perspective and we look at everything surrounding that fight, if we look at how both men are really good on the mic, where both men have a big following regarding the area that they come from, and both men basically being incredibly dominant inside of the octagon as well, so everything building up to that fight would be massive. And I think everybody sees it, and everybody would agree that that would probably be the next step for the UFC, is making that fight. But when we look at when, right, and this is basically the important part when looking at this potential matchup. So Dricus said that he would like to fight at International Fight Week, which is basically the end of June, start of July, around about that period, and said he would like to face Hamzat then, but also said that if it was somewhere else, because usually International Fight Week is happening in Las Vegas, if he had to fight Hamzat in Saudi Arabia, wouldn't care, and it's basically up for whenever. But you can assume basically 4 months from now is when Dricus would want to fight, 4 to 5 months from now. And the problem is, due to Hamzat's history, Hamzat has had a history of pulling out of fights, whether it be to call or other issues. He has a history of pulling out of fights. If Hamzat pulls out of this fight, or if Hamzat isn't ready, then surely the general consensus should be that somebody has to take his place. Like Dricus pulling out of his fight with Israel Adesanya when Izzy was champ, and then Sean Strickland stepped in and took Dricus' spot and ended up beating Izzy, then surely the same would happen to Hamzat. And if that happens, then who would take Hamzat's place? And my initial reaction is Nasruddin Imavov would make the most sense. If somebody had to replace Hamzat due to Hamzat pulling out, whether he was injured or sick again, whatever the case may be, Nasruddin Imavov makes the most sense. But if that fight had to happen, if Dricus and Hamzat was scheduled and they actually fought, then surely on that same card, wherever it is, you would schedule Nasruddin Imavov versus Caio Borralho to have them fight for the #1 contender spot and have that winner take on the winner of Dricus and Hamzat. And when I thought about it, I think it is safe to say, not a lot of style points for saying this. Hamzat would be Dricus's biggest matchup by far, and his toughest opponent by far. Just with regards to how dominant Hamzat has been, then dominating his opponents, finishing fights and in first rounds, and basically his wrestling being probably one of the best wrestlers we've seen in the sport for a very long time, especially regarding the middleweight division. Hamzat has been a dominant force and would definitely be Dricus's toughest matchup inside of the middleweight division. But if Dricus manages to beat Hamzat, I think Dricus will reign in the middleweight division for at least 2 years. It might sound absurd. Anything could happen. We know this. But Dricus being in his prime, if he beats Hamzat Chimaev, I think Dricus will be champion in the middleweight division for a long time. I don't really see Caio Borralho or Nasruddin Imavov being a bigger threat to Dricus's championship than Hamzat. I don't think anyone could be a tougher matchup for Dricus, just with regards to how dominant wrestling has been, especially when you have a dominant wrestler. That was my opinion on it. Is Dricus might be champ for a while if he manages to beat Hamzat Chimaev and actually whoops him, like he said. And just the prospect of that fight, if that fight had to go to the second or third round, we'd be in for a spectacle where Hamzat basically finishes people in one round. We know that if that is not the case, he tends to slow down because the pace he puts on in the first round is not sustainable for 5 rounds. So we know that there is a decline with regards to Hamzat's his whole fighting skill set if he fails to beat his opponent in the first round. So if Dricus and Hamzat fights and that fight goes to the second round, I think Dricus beats him. Now, with regards to Sean Strickland, what is next for Sean Strickland and who will Sean be fighting next inside of the UFC? Now, I've heard a lot of people say that or mention the fact that they don't think Sean will fight for a championship again, and probably thought that this was Sean's last chance at fighting for the middleweight championship. Now, don't necessarily agree with that statement. I think rather, for as long as Dricus is champion inside of the middleweight division, Sean will probably not fight for the middleweight championship, seeing that his last performance, even though I'm a massive Sean fan, obviously a bigger Dricus fan, but a massive Sean fan, Sean's performance was somewhat lackluster. And we can pin it down to might have been staph infection, it might have been whatever, but it wasn't the Sean that we have come accustomed to seeing inside of the octagon. But with that being said, to say that Sean will probably never fight for the middleweight championship again is somewhat insane. Seeing that if we look at the top 5 middleweights inside of the UFC, apart from Dricus, so obviously in that top 5 bracket, we have Nasruddin Imavov, who recently beat Izzy. We have Sean, we have Hamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker, and we can probably say Caio Borralho as well. Are we 100% sure that Sean doesn't beat 3 of those guys? Because Sean has already beaten Nasruddin Imavov. We don't know whether Sean will be able to beat Hamzat, but once again, if Sean had to face Hamzat and survive the first round, I think a lot of people would think Sean would win that fight. Sean versus Caio Borralho, Sean versus Robert Whittaker, a lot of potential matchups. Now, Imavov has recently said that he would like to face Sean Strickland and rematch Sean because he felt like he lost the fight, obviously, but he would like to get that back. Now, big no-go for the UFC, because even Dricus mentioned in the post-fight press conference that 10 out of 10 times Sean Strickland beats Nasruddin Imavov, just the way they stylistically match up. Dricus can't see Nasruddin beating Sean, and honestly, neither can I. Just don't think Nasruddin will beat Sean Strickland due to the fact that Now, Sean is really difficult to hit, and Sean dominated Nasruddin the first time. I think that the exact same thing would happen. So do not schedule Sean Strickland versus Emma, because if Sean wins, then obviously we don't see Sean fighting Dricus again for a trilogy match where he lost the previous 2 fights. So you basically just take out another contender. And with regards to Sean's next opponent, personally I think the thing that makes the most sense is either Sean facing Izzy, or if you want something new, have Sean fight Robert Whittaker. Because the easy one is extremely intriguing, seeing that it is a rematch. Sean beat Izzy, but Izzy was coming off of his victory versus Pereira, so Izzy gave everything in that fight, lost a piece of himself in that fight, having to fight Sean again, this time somewhat in a neutral venue, with regards to neutral circumstances, both men coming off a loss. I think it would do massive numbers, having them at the press conference, spectacle, undivided attention. I think that will make a lot of sense. But also Sean Strickland facing Robert Whittaker, a fight we haven't seen before, would also be intriguing. Seeing how Sean would match up against Rob, match up to Rob's striking, Rob's overall game, where Rob does want to include some takedowns, I think would be an incredible fight. And with regards to Rob, the way he strikes and the way that his offensive striking is put together would be an incredible fight. But I don't think Sean should fight guys that are potential number ones at this moment. And with regards to Sean's layoff, after having his nose broken, probably be right at the same time that Robert Whittaker is right, after Rob obviously suffered his jaw injury against Hamza. So if it was in my hands, if I decided on who fights who inside of the UFC, I would have Sean Strickland taking on Robert Whittaker. And I'd probably have Imavov taking on Kyle Baralio, Dricus taking on Hamza, and then Izzy can take on whoever. Honestly, just enjoy seeing Izzy inside of the octagon. He doesn't want to retire. He still works. Immediately after losing to Imavov, he went and looked at the fight. He's back to training. Love it. Even though people feel like Izzy might damage his reputation, whatever. I don't think so. He has accomplished everything inside of the sport. Let him fight for how long he ever wants to fight. Don't care. Entertaining. Middleweight division is incredible. And I thought about, before watching the press conference and hearing Dricus say it, what was somewhat funny, because it felt like Dricus and Sean Strickland are taking on the roles of Izzy and Robert Whittaker, where Dricus is the new Izzy and Sean Strickland is basically the new Robert Whittaker, where Sean basically stands as Dricus's gatekeeper to the middleweight championship, due to the fact that Sean can beat a lot of guys that are seen as potential number one contenders inside of the UFC, and obviously Dricus being champ basically wants to lap the division. But it feels like history has repeated itself in the most absurd way possible, where Dricus is champion and Sean basically serves as Dricus's gatekeeper, up until the point where Sean's going to be undeniable, and we'll probably see Sean versus Dricus for the third time, where Sean has been on a 3-5 winning streak. If Sean fights Imavov, if Sean maybe beats Baralio, we'll see Sean solidify himself as being the number one contender, possibly once again, the same way Robert Whittaker did it when he fought Izzy. He lost to Izzy when Rob was the champ, then basically had to go through all of these opponents, re-establish himself as the number one contender, fought Izzy again. Might see history repeat itself. Who do you think should be next for Dricus Du Plessis? Obviously, Hamza Shamaev. Who do you think should be next for Sean Strickland? Let me know in the comment section which fight makes the most sense.